So can you guys tell me the story again about how you met?
Ellen, why don't you start?
Well, our family rented a cottage, 25 Root Avenue, Chautauqua. We did it, first time I remember going there was about 1930. And, gosh, I'm not good at this. And our family, before we went to Chautauqua, there was great excitement and anticipation. And Mother would put the big trunk upstairs, upstairs hall. We all had our own section. And when we were a little, around 6 or so, we could have our own section, put our own clothes in there. Then they sent those off by way of the railroad. Then we all piled into various ways of getting to Chautauqua different times. And so there were 6 of us kids and Mother, because Pop didn't go, he stayed to teach. And one time I went in the rumble seat with Marcy and Aunt Edna.
What's a rumble seat? Yeah, what's a rumble seat?
What's a rumble seat? Tell me.
Oh, a rumble seat?
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
Well, that's the back of the. Here's your car, front.
A 2-seater car.
Okay.
And the rumble seat opens up so that the back is there. And you sit in the seats.
And you were out in the open air, sitting.
Where the space. Oh, you got. My hair got so tangled. We loved it. And anyway, we'd get to Chautauqua. And that's the first I remember of being there. But then you carried
That
on.
was 1929. No, wait, excuse me. Actually, I think it was 1928.
Okay.
In 1929, my two aunts had bought a cottage, and because they were interested in adult education and going up to Chautauqua. And one of the aunts lived in Buffalo, my mother's sister, and the other aunt lived in Canandaigua, where all three sisters lived in Canandaigua, but only one of them was a purchaser of the cottage. And so my aunt asked my mother if Ralph could go up to Chautauqua with her and stay during the week, because her husband worked in Buffalo and he came down to Chautauqua on weekends, but she did not like to stay alone the whole week. So my folks said yes, without asking for my permission, of course. And I was only 8 years old. No, I was 7 at that time. And so I went, but I didn't want to go. And I was 19, this was 1929, I was as homesick as I can imagine, or I can remember, standing up on the bed in the upstairs part of the cottage, looking out the window as my mother and father drove away. And I knew for 3 long weeks I was not going to be at home, and the tears were streaming down my face. And, however, I got over it after the first day and managed to amuse myself. Well, that was my first introduction to Chautauqua. The following year, 1930, was the second year that her folks came. They didn't go up in 1929, but the second year they did go up. And I remember in 1929, when I was there was a lot of construction work going on right near the cottage that my aunt had. And what they were doing was building an opera house for operas and for theater right next to the cottage. I didn't realize that in 1930, when we came back, there was the big structure, and just on the other side of the structure was the cottage that her family rented. So we were within almost shouting distance of each other. And I was there to stay for the summer that time. 3 weeks had mushroomed into 8 weeks, which was the season. And I was fairly okay with it, but I still wondered. About 8 weeks long, and I didn't know anybody. Well, I saw these 2 kids down behind the Opera House, and they were working in a ditch that had lots of
window well.
Actually it was a drainage ditch, and I think there was a grated ceiling. Anyway, it had the field behind was a big parking lot, and they had just mowed it down for parking for the Opera House. And so there was all this long mown grass, and these 2 kids were there raking up the grass, and they were building a hut over this little ditch area.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, that looks kind of interesting. And I walked down from my aunt's cottage, and I said, "Can I help you? Can I work with you?" And they said, "Sure." So the 3 of us built this little grass hut, and that's how I got acquainted with them, with the Lee family. And from then on, for 10 summers, I went up and helped my aunt in the summertime and kept her company. They came with their family, and
We got to stay 3 months. Hello, everybody.
the last summer I was there was the summer, and the last summer, no, they still worked. The last summer I was there was the summer that the Nazis moved into Poland, 1939. And I can remember her father listening to the radio in their cottage and coming down the hill to tell us that he thought war was going to start. And by December of that, it was December of 1941, that was when Pearl Harbor occurred, and we got into the war, but Britain, of course, got in 1939.
Yeah.
And he said, "This does not look good for the world," and he sure enough was right. But by the summer of 1941, I was a junior in college, and I had summer work up in the Adirondack Mountains at that hotel that I told you about. So I didn't go to Chautauqua that summer, and that's kind of ended our summer sessions there. But tell her about the last day of each summer session.
You're kidding.
What we did.
Oh, yeah.
Stuart was her brother, and there was the 3 of us
Our
also.
main goal was to get money. And so when we were little, we found money. There was a great big nice sandbox with pergola pillars, and I mean it was big. It was a big area. And so we would play there, and we would find pennies. And we were just in wealth. And we thought, of course then, I thought they had lost them. Now I realize that adults probably threw them in on purpose for us kids, like us.
Yeah.
And anyway, with our money, we would save it up, and every summer, or many summers, we would snitch somebody's, this was just a couple of times, rowboat. And we would, first of all,
we'd get up early in the
Yeah,
morning,
get
and
up
the
early.
last day that we were both getting ready to go back to our homes.
Mm-hmm.
and we would go in the rowboat, and we'd weep and cry and say goodbye and see you next year. Then we would go to the waffle kitchen and have a nice breakfast with the money we saved.
Your pennies, sandbox pennies.
Right,
A
pennies
fair-
add up.
A farewell breakfast. We did that many summers.
Yeah, we did.
When we first met, her brother was about 5 years old. Ellen was about 7. Stuart. And I was about, she was 7, and I was about 8 and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So I was the oldest,
He was the leader.
the ringleader. But we had lots of fun every
and
summer.
we went all over that grounds and behaved and were quiet, didn't do any trouble, so nobody ever said a word to us. We
And
never got one word said to us.
one of the nice things was, since we lived right next to the Opera House, which is also the Juilliard School in New York, performed the summer operas. And we would sit in there and watch them rehearse, and they were very good. And especially dress rehearsal times. We would see these whole operas.
Well, we were allowed, we
Yeah.
kids, we just went in.
And
Yeah.
they never kicked
Nobody
us
said
out.
not to go in.
And then we also watched the plays. The Cleveland Repertory Theater did the summer plays, and we would go into the house and watch them rehearse and watch the plays develop. And so we lived in that Norton Hall, it was called, and we knew every nick and corner. We knew where the dressing rooms were, and we climbed up to the gallery where the ropes that held the scenery and so on. It was just like a playground for us. And Stewart had a job several summers. The stage crew, they all came from New York for the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And the stage crew hired Stewart to get some
Well water.
well water from a nearby well. And they paid him a nickel a container. And so that was, some of our money came from those nickels. And sometimes I helped him. But that was his job. Her older sister became the costumer for the opera company. She had to make sure that they were pressed and sewed, stitched properly before they went on stage.
Becky.
Yeah.
Yeah, Becky
I never
was
knew
the
that.
costumer. And her other brothers tended the shrubbery and the grounds around the opera house to keep it looking nice, mowed the lawn and so on.
And
So,
then worked at the amphitheater.
yeah, her family was all involved with the opera house. And then one of them ran the public address system at the amphitheater that I was telling you about. So they were much involved.
And my mother had the little octagon building. You know what that is?
A little eight-sided.
Freestanding. And she had the little Sunday school kids on Sunday. Had perfect order. There'd be 30 to 50. And she just handled them beautifully. And she wanted to go to Chautauqua to learn to be a kindergarten teacher. So she would go to the classes that were near our house.
Back in Beaver Falls.
No.
Oh, at Chautauqua.
At
yeah.
Chautauqua, 25 route.
Yeah.
She would go in the summer. She'd save her money for that.
Uh-huh.
And anyway, what was I going to say?
Well, and their father didn't come up until Geneva College in Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, where he taught.
He,
When their summer session finished, he would come up and spend the last 2 weeks of the season at Chautauqua.
so